What's going on, fight fans, D-Gens, everyone alike? We're here for UFC Vegas 70. I'm joined here with Dan. We're missing one third of the puzzle this week, and Kev. Last week we were missing one third with Dan, so kind of playing ring around the rosy here with my co-host. What's going on, Dan?
Man, appreciate you guys holding down the fort for me last week.
Go ahead, get right to it.
I was busy with some real life work stuff, but I was able to catch the episode. And obviously for anyone who was in that Discord last week, I was very high on Aaron Blanchfield. I'm not going to toot my own horn too much tonight, but what I will say is that it's always nice that whenever you kind of look at a card at the beginning of the week and you have one fight, circled, and it's always a dog spot, that plus money, and you just have a good feeling. You feel like you got the take. You feel like you have a good idea on both fighters and how they're going to approach the fight, and then the fight just plays out exactly how you think it would. I mean, it feels good. Not going to lie. The fact that you two were on Andrade as well, not going to lie, that feels even better. A couple guys in the Discord too were on Andrade, and for those that tailed, I mean, they were able to cash. I mean, Blanchfield just absolute stud. I mean, I think she surprised all of us with her stand up. We know what she could do on the ground, but I think in that first round, I think what surprised even me is just how she was tagging Andrade. I saw Andrade. I don't know if that's true or not, mentioning a boob slip, kind of messing with her focus, and that's why she was kind of messed her up a little bit. Whatever it is, I don't know. Blanchfield is the real deal. Can't wait to see what's next for her. I mean, she has a championship mentality. You can't mess around with those Renzo Gracie black belts, man. They are a problem on the ground.
Yeah, and I think that Jessica Andrade excuse is up there, top 3, I think, in combat sports. The other one that comes to mind is like Deontay Wilder wearing that 50-pound suit, I think, on the entrance against Tyson Fury. But to lose the way she did and then blame it on a wardrobe malfunction or Janet Jackson moment, whatever you want to call it, that's poor sportsmanship, I think, a little bit. But I agree. I think Blanchfield kind of surprised all of us with her stand, especially me. If there's one thing I was ragging on her for, it was that, she basically has pillows for hands and she doesn't necessarily know how to throw them. But, Andrade was rather reckless on the feet, to say the least. And Blanchfield definitely capitalized on some moments, popped her back. I think honestly landed the bigger shots throughout the fight on the feet.
Yep.
And we saw what happened when this fight hit the mat. It was over, as soon as she got on top. I mean, she switched over to side control, and, that was basically a wrap. Super impressive. Interested to see what the line would be, say, if she goes against Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and this is one thing that I mentioned going into this fight is how easily Valentina was able to control Andrade from the body lock position, land top position, and just kind of have her way with her. And we saw, I mean, that's how Blanchfield ended up landing that takedown, right? I mean, she tried initially a couple times. Andrade was able to defend, but eventually she was able to get that body lock, get that inside trip, slice through her guard like a hot knife through butter. But yeah, against Valentina, that'll be interesting. I mean, obviously she's fighting Alexa Grasso next. I know a lot of people are interested to see, just based off of Valentina's last fight, which some folks had her losing. So be interesting. I mean, it's nice to see all this fresh blood in the 125 division now coming up. So the days of, I think, Valentina just running through everyone are long gone. We've got some young blood, some interesting fighters. Got a great fighter. Well, not 125, I believe. Suarez is fighting 135, if I'm not mistaken, right? But yeah, no, the next kind of generation of fighters coming through, and we're seeing it evolve in front of our own eyes. So it's great to see.
Yeah, no, definitely a great performance, especially considering who it was against, what she's accomplished in Andrade in this sport. Short notice or not, very impressive what Blanchfield was able to do. But the past is the past. You get to enjoy that one until Saturday ends. Then it's on to the new slate. And to kick us off here on the main card of UFC 270, we have Erick Gonzalez taking on Trevor Peek. Two guys, not much UFC experience between them. I think Erick Gonzalez really only has the 2 fights, one against Jim Miller back in 2021, and then another one this year or last year against Terrence McKinney. Both were finished losses, and then Trevor Peek coming off a Dana White Contender Series win. saw this fight on the main card. I don't know about you, and I was kind of confused why it was placed here. But if you just watch the two guys fight, it kind of explains itself. They kind of, kill or be killed, live by the sword, die by the sword. I mean, Trevor Peek 7-0, all 7 wins by knockout, 5 of which occurred in the first round. And then Erick Gonzalez, I believe he's got plenty of finishes. 9 out of 14 of his wins are finishes. And, as I said, die by the sword. I believe all of his losses are by finish as well. So definitely going to be an exciting fight. I'm not sure what the numbers are for the over-under, but Trevor Peek making his debut minus 225 against Gonzalez, who come back there plus 175. For me, it's tough to really lay minus 225 on a guy that you haven't seen in the UFC, and especially looking at his performance on the Contender Series, pretty much just got beat up for the first 3.5, 4 minutes of that fight, and then eventually wound up, landing the big shots of his own and getting out of there, got the job done. But, if there's one thing we learned about that performance is, one, that Trevor Peek could take a punch, that he's very durable, and two, that he really just throws no caution into the wind. He's just throwing haymakers, trying to get you out there. Chin is wide up, exposed, ready to be countered. And I guess you could say the same about both guys, because Erick Gonzalez, when he fought Jim Miller, same thing, kind of overextended on a head kick, left his chin up and got absolutely dropped. Very hittable. I think, though, if you're looking at, any advantage for Gonzalez in this fight, it's that he's the longer fighter. I mean, he's a 5'11" lightweight. I believe he's 2 inches taller than Trevor Peek and has a 5-inch reach advantage. So, at plus 175, that's basically the only thing you're looking at there as an advantage. Otherwise, I think you got to give the endurance advantage to Trevor Peek. This is all in limited sample size, though, so it's really hard to put too much weight into these factors. But if anything, I'd probably lean like an under here, just a guess, but I'm probably staying far away from this from a betting perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking here at Bet365. Like, fight doesn't go is like minus 500. So I think Vegas is right there with you, and I think that's part of the reason why this is like the first fight of the card. Looking at the prelims, I mean, there were a couple fights that I would have much rather seen kick off the card. I mean, O'Day Osborne, Charles Johnson, Aliev against Rafael Alves. I mean, those are two fights that I love on this card. But if we know anything from the UFC, they always like to kick off a card with a bang, and this fight is sure to deliver those fireworks. Trevor Peek, I mean, kind of a feel-good story on the Contender Series. He got his ass kicked for 2.5 rounds, and I mean, essentially, his opponent got tired of kicking his ass and ended up just gassing himself out, right? And we saw Peek just kind of capitalize on that. Whether he'll be able to do that here against Gonzalez, I still have yet to kind of come to a conclusion. I mean, I did some kind of homework on Gonzalez, and the guy has some skills. I think both of his losses in the UFC have come off of dumb mistakes, right? The guy, and in both fights, he's actually landed solid shots on his opponent, rocked him a little bit, but seems like he can't get out of his own way, right? Again, you mentioned overhand right. A couple knockouts, but the guy is not known for his knockout power. He's much more of a submission guy, and I think a lot of that is just kind of the careless defense that you see from Gonzalez in a bunch of his fights. Like he's very flat-footed. His defense is less to be a little less to be desired, but one thing that you can see, I mean, the guy does have a little bit more experience, literally 3 times the amount of fights that Peek has, coming in, against a lot of, Latin fighters. So, the guy can obviously bang. I mean, he has a loss in his, before he made the UFC to Rafa Garcia, who is, I would say UFC caliber at the very least. So, he's been in there with some guys that, have some, have some skill and some veterans in there. So I just don't see how you can lay, whatever it is, minus 200 on Trevor Peek here. I mean, as bad as Gonzalez has looked, I mean, Peek, he has a win over Kamaworthy. And I remember looking at him in the Contender Series earlier this year, and I actually had Peek by finish, funny enough. So you can imagine how I felt when that one cashed, right? Because the guy was getting his ass kicked for 2.5 rounds. But I don't think Gonzalez is going to kind of gas himself out here. I think if he stays within himself, doesn't overextend, I think that he's the more technical striker. As crazy as that sounds, against Terrence McKinney, he was kind of getting overwhelmed in that first minute, and then he caught McKinney with a strong left that rocked him and forced McKinney to grapple. And he ended up on his back, tries to get up instead of putting his back up against the fence. He goes turtle and stands up, and then McKinney just jumps on his back and chokes him out. So, between that, the naked crescent kick he throws against Jim Miller, I mean, those are two mistakes that I think can be corrected. And against a guy like Peak, who's clearly not the most technical, I think there's an opportunity for him to get his first UFC win here. So it's hands down a dog or pass situation. And to be honest, I mean, I think the under may be a bit of a trap here, because I can absolutely see Gonzalez maybe being a little bit more conservative. I mean, the guy has, lost his first two fights in the UFC. One more, he's out. That's for sure. And Peak, I mean, again, he's durable. We've seen that he's durable. He can take a shot. He'll keep coming. He's, you're going to have the type of guy you're going to have to kill to get out of there. But, again, I think just skill-wise, a lot less to be desired. And you kind of felt like when he got that contract on the Contender Series, it was more out of pity almost, right? I mean, he was begging for it. I mean, it was an exciting fight, and Dana likes guys that put on those types of fights. So I mean, he's not here for his skill. We'll put it that way. He's here because he puts on exciting fights. But I may take a flyer on Gonzalez here. I mean, from a pick perspective, there's no way that I can lay minus 200 on Trevor Peak. So I haven't decided if I'm going to bet Gonzalez here. Everyone seems to be on Peak. I think the handling was somewhere like 90% last time I checked.
Sheesh.
So, I just don't see it. I could be way off here. Gonzalez, like I said, I mean, you always hate to fade a bad fighter with the worst fighter. We've talked about this time and time again. But, I think certainly from an attribute perspective, from an experience perspective, Gonzalez has what it takes, I think, to pull this one out. So I leave Gonzalez, I would say maybe like 60% here. I don't know if I'll be betting it, though.
Yeah, I feel like I fall in the same exact boat as you. I'm just watching them both fight. Clearly, Gonzalez has more technicality, more skill to his approach, whereas Peak, straight up brawler, right? Just kind of haymaker. I think, he is tough, but he's very vulnerable. And it's going to come down to whether or not Gonzalez can capitalize on those moments. The one thing that's promising if you're taking Gonzalez is there's virtually zero submission threat from Trevor Peak. I mean, he had guys in bad positions on the ground and had multiple opportunities to look to try to get, a hook in or try to cinch in a rear naked choke. And not once did even, seem to cross his mind to go for that. So definitely dog or pass situation for me too. Just hard to get to Peak at minus 225, especially considering he was a dog on the Contender Series too. I think he was plus 155 there, and like we both said, he was losing that fight until he didn't anymore. But just a gross fight here. Let's move on to the next fight, which is Mike Malott versus Yohan Lainesse. Two Canadians here, Dan. So naturally, I'm going to kick this one off to you.
Yeah, it's great to see that we'll get a Canadian winning a fight in 2023 at the expense of another. But I digress. We'll see who the top Canadian welterweight is, and Yohan Lainesse, Quebec native. I'm based in Montreal. He actually knocked out one of my training partners in one of his earlier fights in his career. Funny enough. And the guy can crack. The guy has power. Contender Series. I mean, I remember him going up against a tough prospect, Justin Burleson, knocked him out cold. Comes in, fights Gabe Green, looks good in that first round, drops Green. I know if you bet Green, like you're sweating that one, and then I think as a lot of fighters kind of do, they learn things about themselves in these fights, and I think what Lainesse learned there is. He's going to have to keep some bullets in the clip a little bit for those round 2, round 3. There is always going to be guys that can take your shots and keep coming. I mean, the UFC is the cream of the crop, and you're not going to knock everybody out in the first round unless your name is like Francis Ngannou or something. But I think what happened in his next fight against Darian Weeks, and we had Lainesse as a KP play, if you remember. That was a play I was quite high on. Bit of a sweaty split decision win, but came out. I think, Darian Weeks is the kind of guy that can keep fights competitive, but tends to fall short. And Lainesse probably played it a little bit too conservative, which is why it was so close. I think skill for skill, like the guy, like I said, has the power advantage. He'll have that in this fight as well, I believe. But it'll be interesting to see how he approaches this fight. He goes from one end of the spectrum and burning himself out in the first round to the other end and being maybe a little bit too conservative. Against a guy like Malott who hurts my heart. Sub my boy Shimon Sportitsky on the Contender Series. We know, unfortunately, I can't get past that one. But knocks out Mickey Gall, who, listen, Mickey Gall is long ways away from the guy long ways away from the guy that subbed CM Punk, right? Fall from grace certainly from him. He's not in the UFC anymore, and maybe the answer to this, but he beats Trevin Giles in CFFC, but I don't understand why was he fighting in CFFC after a win in the UFC? I don't get that.
You're talking about Mike Malott?
Yeah.
He fought after UFC or after Contender Series?
So he beats Mickey Gall, and then he fought about a month ago.
No, that was a grappling match. That was
it was a grappling match.
That was a grappling match, yeah.
Okay, well, that makes sense then. Okay, I didn't realize. But yeah, Mike Malott, he's got some solid skills. Well-rounded. He's got some submission. He's got the submission threat. He's got power in his hands. I think certainly from a power perspective, you got to give the edge to Lainesse. But I think everywhere else, it's probably going to be Malott. Both guys match up really well, and pretty even. I'm kind of torn here. I think early it's going to be Lainesse. As the fight progresses, probably Malott. I may have to lean Lainesse just because of my Quebec bias here. But again, you got 8-1-1 against 9-1, right? Somebody is going to go down. I think if I look here on the kind of fight doesn't go.
It's minus 300, right? Which seems accurate because each their last two fights, both of them were minus 250, I think, around that range for fight doesn't go. So definitely lines up, and I feel the same way as you on this. I'm kind of torn. A big part of me leans Lainesse here. I think at plus 185 where he's at, plenty of value. Malott minus 220, and I actually noted this as well. It's funny to see how Lainesse kind of evolved in that second UFC fight. The guy only landed 24 strikes.
Yeah.
And he got the nod. He only threw 67 of them. And if you compare that to his first fight, right, it was against Gabe Green. And he landed 42 of 81 strikes, and that was in less than 2 rounds. So to see the volume just drop off there, definitely as a direct result of him gassing as hard as he did in that first fight. Going to be interesting to see how, he approaches this fight, because I think if he comes out like a brute, I think he could get an early finish here, because you look at someone like Mike Malott, he's a coach, right? He has tons of athletes in the UFC that he trains with and kind of, oversees them and coaches them. When you're talking technically and skillful, like Malott, I think checks all the boxes outside of power that Lainesse does. But I'm a little bit fearful that Malott is one of those athletes or students of mixed martial arts and not necessarily a fighter, because as much as all these skills combine into a fair here, it's still a fight at the end of the day. And I feel Lainesse is more of the fighter between the two. And from a striking standpoint, it's worth noting that Mickey Gall busted up Mike Malott. Mike Malott, he was gushing blood out of his nose, and Mickey Gall is not known for his striking one iota. So it's going to be interesting to see if Lainesse lands a few bombs, how Malott reacts to that, and if he's able to still push forward. But I think Malott has had a very interesting career, because you look at him in 2014, he fought Hakeem Dawodu, lost by knockout there, and that's down at featherweight. Fought again in Bellator to a draw, I think, the next year, and then he had a 2-year layoff, fought once more, and then not again until 2020, another 3-year layoff there. And, he beat your boy Smotrisky on Dana White Contender Series, right? But not the best of wins, because we saw Smotrisky come back to the Contender Series and lose once again. So he really hasn't beaten anyone great, because Mickey Gall as well, like you mentioned it, his claim to fame is submitting CM Punk. So it's not like he's rising to the top against top competition. This one's way closer than the line suggests, I think.
Yeah, I think I would agree, and I think the fight doesn't go line being what it is. I think indicate that I think people see Malott being able to finish Lainesse here. Right, Mallott's never been finished, right? Then fight doesn't go at -300. So you got one guy that has been
Malott
finished,
has
one
been
guy that
finished.
hasn't. I mean,
Malott has been finished.
has he? Yeah.
Hakeem
Okay. So
Dawood finished him at featherweight.
was that overturned then? Because he's like, I'm seeing like 8-1-1 on Tapology.
No,
Maybe
he
maybe
lost
got
to.
dinged for
You're
something.
talking about Mike Malott, right?
Yeah. Or maybe
Yeah,
I'm looking at a great match in that case. Yeah. Okay. Listen, I mean, Dawoud, another Canadian, right? So this guy is no love for
that
the
might be the
Canadians with
sign.
this guy. He doesn't give a shit. So I don't know. I'm gonna lean in like Quebec native here and hope for the best. Like I said, I think Lainesse has the power to get him out of there. It'd be interesting to see. I think yeah, tough to bet this one here though. At +180 though, I mean Lainesse, I don't want to say it's value, but it's worth a shot.
Oh, it is. I think it is. You're the juice is worth the squeeze there, I think, at that number. Because even if you look, you kind of extrapolate a little further. Like, if Mike Malott say his greatest advantage is on the ground, well, Lainesse has great takedown defense, so he's going to be the bigger guy. I'd have to assume he's the stronger guy at least when he's at full gas. So
Yeah,
if this stays standing, I think +185 is going to look pretty nice throughout.
I hear you. Yep, makes sense.
And if Lainesse is one of those guys that fades as the fight goes, you might be able to get +185 pre-fight, and then maybe even a good like +200 number on Malott. Say he loses the first round pretty handily. You never know. It could open you up to a few hedging possibilities.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm not one to hedge. I've got a set of testicles, but well, I hear you, man. From a financial perspective, and betting with your brain and not your balls. I mean, I understand the opportunity there, but yeah, no, I gotta side with my Quebec boy. You know what I mean? There's so few of us left that gotta rock with him.
I feel you. This might end up being a little KP play, maybe a little bit of sprinkle there on like a Lainesse knockout, but. The Canadian bout has been covered, I think, to its fullest extent. So without further ado, let's move into the return of Tatiana Suarez taking on Montana De La Rosa. Suarez is where is she? -800. Comeback on De La Rosa +535. If you hear anybody, this is for the listeners. If you hear anybody this week leading up to the fight tell you how +550 is value on Montana De La Rosa, just don't tune into their content anymore. Unfollow them on Twitter, whatever it may be, because Tatiana Suarez, she hasn't fought in 4 years, so a lot of people may have forgotten. People like us, I think the lore kind of grows a little bit stronger with all that time off, because we've seen her fight before, and there's a reason why people call her the female Khabib. You look at her takedown accuracy. It's funny because I was looking at this 62% takedown accuracy, but that does not paint the whole picture, because the outlier was her last fight against Nina Nunez, where she landed, I believe it was 4 of 13 attempts. Take that fight out of the equation. She has an 82% takedown accuracy rate, which is just absolutely unheard of. She took Carla Esparza down 9 times on 11 attempts. You just don't do that. And I think that if she's able to implement her game plan and, work this fight to the mat, we're going to look at like a quick knockout victory, because if she gets you there, she likes to punish you in that position. She wants to land damage, get you out of there. A line I was looking at actually was a double chance of knockout or points for Tatiana Suarez, which looked kind of juicy to me. I think it was around -150-ish, which, brings you down a shit ton for -800. I don't necessarily see submission in the plans for Tatiana Suarez. I know that she has majority submissions on her resume, but when she gets you down, she's really looking to do damage. And against someone like De La Rosa, I think her one shot at this fight is, an arm bar from bottom or something quick. It's definitely going to come by means of submission. So that's why I actually have circled fight does not go the distance +105 here. I think that, like I mentioned, if Suarez gets you down, it's going to be ground and pound. I think that her path to victory is likely inside the distance. And when it comes to De La Rosa, like I mentioned, she has armbar victories. When she's on bottom, she looks for the armbar. We saw a moment there against Macy Barber her last time out where, she attempted one, she almost got it. And that's literally going to be her only path. So if that's the way that this fight's going to go, give me a plus number on fight doesn't go the distance. I really like that here. But, looking at Tatiana Suarez, she KO'd Carla Esparza, who just had the belt, and she submitted Alexa Grasso, who's just fighting for a belt. So her resume is stacked up, and this fight should really favor her. I think that she gets the job done early. I think you're on mute there.
Plus money on the fight. She said for a reason. I think that she's. I mean, some serious game on. It's tough.
Dan, I think you're getting rugged a little bit here. Your internet keeps going in and out.
All right, give me a second here. Let me try something.
Nothing new here. Hopefully I don't have to end up doing the show solo here. But Dan should be back in a minute. Get his internet figured out. But yeah, guys, Tatiana Suarez is legit. She's the real deal. I'm sure Dan's going to jump back in here and kind of just reiterate that and reinforce just how good Suarez is.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Always got to have a backup, so we're running on the phone here. But yeah, listen, I think with Suarez, I mean, the girl's been a fighter all her life. Cancer survivor, 4-year layoff, neck injuries. I mean, you name it, she's kind of gone through it. And I think she's going to come in here with something to prove. Yes, she's been injured. Yes, she's had a lot of rehab to do. But I mean, we'd be foolish to think that she hasn't developed her skills in the time away. You know what I mean? So I think a knock on her has always been like her striking. I'm not going to say that she's going to come in here and give her kind of head kick KO Montana De La Rosa. I mean, I think her bread and butter is always going to be the grappling. But yeah, I do think that she brings a physicality to this division that not a lot of females can handle. And this seems like a bit of a tune-up fight for her. She's been out for so long that they can't just throw her in with the top of the division. De La Rosa has been around the block a while. She has some solid wins, and I think it's a great first fight for Suarez to kind of get her feet back from under her. So any way that you can look to, I mean, again, this is like a free leg in any kind of parlay. I mean, it's tough to say anything otherwise. To say Montana has like a shot here. I mean, Suarez would really have to show up and be like a shell of herself to stand any chance for Montana to stand any chance here, in my opinion. I think the way that she's able to like take women down, control them, and like unleash like vicious top ground and pound. I see this fight going no different. So yeah, fight doesn't go. I love that. Not quite sure what Suarez is to finish. I can imagine that's probably not plus money, but yeah, I mean this is a free leg in any parlay. I mean not much to add. I don't really give De La Rosa any shot here.
Yeah, I think fight doesn't go. Not fight doesn't go. Suarez inside the distance I saw sitting around plus 130. So at plus 105, fight doesn't go. Kind of protect yourself from any sort of craziness happening. Again, I don't really see De La Rosa getting it done, but I think I personally would pay that 25-cent insurance there on the line.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think I would agree with that. I always kind of you always got to be a little bit cautious with some of these fights. I mean, Suarez can submit her, Suarez can finish her on top, but there's always that risk where all that time off. I mean, maybe we see De La Rosa survive the 3 rounds. I mean, I don't see it that way. I think Suarez is going to come in there, land takedowns early, finish her with ground and pound, and kind of get that easy dub. But yeah, I mean, stranger things have happened in the octagon. She's definitely she's fought tough fighters. I think again, she's going up against a veteran in De La Rosa who's been in there with with the likes of some very competent fighters. I mean, Bueno Silva, who we saw last week, Macy Barber, Andrea Lee, these are all competent UFC caliber fighters. She got choked out by Mackenzie Dern in Legacy way back when. So I think again, good test for her here, but I think Suarez is is kind of a shoe in. I mean, like I said, free leg to any parlay here that you can kind of throw in.
I wonder what a Suarez Bo Nickel parlay would pay.
You might be able to get a fry at McDonald's or something like that. Who knows?
It's minus 500 if you put them two together. I might actually take that. It's like a free 20% ROI if you do. So why not?
Yeah, why not?
I think they're both as close as you can get to a shoe-in this sport. But, without further ado, let's get on to everyone's favorite heavyweight main card fight. This is Augusto Sakai taking on Don'Tale Mayes. Don'Tale Mayes coming off a tough battle against the top heavyweight in the world, Hamdi Abdel Wahab, a fight in which he fell a little bit short on. And actually got overturned, right? Because Hamdi popped for steroids. So not technically a loss unless you bet him. Then it's definitely a loss there. I actually had Hamdi in that fight, not just because he's a local from my area, just more of a fade on Don'Tale Mayes. But when you're talking about wanting to fade guys, right? Augusto Sakai coming off his 4th straight knockout loss in the UFC. And, somehow he's sitting at a minus 125 favorite in this matchup. And Don'Tale Mayes is plus 115. I don't know about you. I've been looking at this fight, trying to find a way to play it, and I keep coming back to Don'Tale Mayes. Like, it sucks to say, and I don't want to. It feels almost wrong saying that out loud because I feel like people are just gonna, click off and turn this show off after hearing that. But Sakai, like I said, 4 straight knockout losses in the heavyweight division, and the guy he's going up against has the grappling advantage here. It's just something doesn't necessarily sit right with me. And, peeling back the layer a little bit more, Augusto Sakai, he has 4 UFC wins, 2 of which knockout over Marcin Tybura and Chase Sherman. The other 2 both split decision wins over Blagoy Ivanov and Andrei Arlovsky. So, has his good work in the UFC kind of offset his bad work to this point to make him a favorite on this losing skid? I don't necessarily think so. I don't really know either. When you factor in the Mayes grappling advantage and the fact that he's 6'6" with an 81-inch reach advantage, which is just ludicrous. He's a massive guy in there, 3 inches taller than Sakai, 6-inch reach. I don't know. I could be seeing this totally wrong. I mean, the guy lands 53% of his takedown attempts. He only gassed in his last fight versus Hamdi because he was doing a lot of defensive wrestling, which, weighs on your gas tank more than anything. Not going to have to worry about that in this matchup. And, not to mention, I believe he trains with heavyweight John Jones, right? So he's getting that good work in against the GOAT. Everything's lining up for me wanting to take Don'Tale Mayes at plus 115 here. I just don't see how you trust Augusto Sakai at any number, let alone a favorite number.
I gotta disagree with you on this one here. I mean, Don'Tale Mayes, the only reason we're not seeing Sakai as a minus, 200 plus favorite, is because of his recent losing streak. I mean, before that Overeem fight, a fight that he was winning, by the way, he was winning that fight. And then, I think it was like 3rd or 4th round, gets taken down. And then Overeem just kind of showcased his veteran savviness and starts with the ground and pound. But I think, actually, sorry, that was round 5, right? So Sakai has been, I want to say, maybe in those deep waters, right? I mean, he made it through round 4. So I think in a 3-round fight against a guy who, I mean, quite frankly, Don'Tale Mayes, you're whatever price you're paying because he's 6'6", got an 81-inch reach. The guy is massive, right? But skill for skill, like, oh God, I had him against Hamdi, and that was probably the most frustrating fight I've ever seen in my life when I've had a bet on a guy. He just doesn't impress me anyway. I mean, this guy almost lost the fight to Rocky Martinez. He couldn't finish Rocky Martinez. Okay, think about that for a second. I mean, Josh Parisian, another garbage can. The guy has a win over like Harry Hunsucker in his first pro MMA fight. I mean, he's just not good. I remember watching his Contender Series fight. Super, super unimpressive. I was watching half the battle, and our boy Dan Levy actually mentioned how Snoop Dogg was saying how Dante Muniz, he's not invited to the gang fight. You know what I mean? I think that, and a comment like that is kind of funny, but like basically what he's saying is that this guy is not a fighter. You know, he's a big athletic build who, you know, for one reason or another, decides that he wants to fight. And you know, more often than not, I mean, big guys like that who won the sort of like the genetic lottery, if you will, they're going to have success at heavyweight because I mean, you see the sort of the skill parity at that division, right? Guys that are shit can go on these win streaks. I mean, you know, let's not forget Parker Porter won 3 fights in a row in the heavyweight division at one point, right? I mean, strange things can happen, but Sakai has competent stand-up skills. Okay, let's just call a spade a spade. I mean, I know that he's been finished 4 times in a row. They've been all against top guys, and that's going to be the argument here. Is that, you know, has that damage that he's taken in these last 4 fights just kind of, you know, run him into the ground? But even outside that, right? I mean, he lost to Czech Congo back in Bellator in 2017. Czech Congo, a UFC vet, a guy that knows how to win fights. So it seems to me that Sakai is the kind of guy that wins when he's supposed to win and loses when he's supposed to lose. That makes sense. I think he's going to win here. I think that Mays' wrestling is you know, nowhere near. I mean, Hamdi has good wrestling. I mean, you know, he is solid grappling, good power. Not to mention he was juiced to the gills, right? So,
Yeah.
I just think here that if Sakai, you know, approaches this with a smart game plan, you know, uses his movement, you know, lands a jab, I think he can frustrate Mays. I think he can even finish him. But I will never bet on Dante Mays ever again. I mean, I don't care. I'll take my shot on Sakai here before I bet this guy. I just like, you know, his wrestling is whatever, his striking is whatever. I just don't see like where his strength is. You know, he's just kind of okay everywhere. Where Sakai, I mean, we know how he wants to win fights, right? He's got, you know, competent stand up. And you know, again, I think once he takes like a step up in competition, he'll probably get finished again. But not against Mays. I just don't see it happening. I'm going to plant the flag here on Sakai and eat my words if he goes down in a flaming ball of shit on Saturday. You know, four losses in a row. The guy is up against the wall. I think he'll be cut from the UFC at some point or another. But I think he gets this win here. I mean, Mays he's just not good. Just period. I mean, he's just not good.
Are we kind of entering the fading a bad fighter with the bad fighter territory though?
Well, no, because you know, again, I mean, look at Sakai before the Overeem fight. I mean, he had some solid wins. And there's a reason why they were putting him in main events and pay-per-view cards. I mean, they were teeing him up to be the next, you know, big Brazilian heavyweight. He fell short for sure. They gave him chance after chance. I think it's just one of these situations where if Sakai can just kind of go back to doing what got him to the dance in the first place, and that's, you know, using volume, using that jab, using the good movements. I mean, the guy has hands for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a reason that like he was what plus 105 versus Tai Tuivasa. Like that's a close line against someone that, you know, that high up in the heavyweight rankings.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Tuivasa. I mean, even Rosenstrike, like slight underdog against slight underdog. So I think Vegas, you know, seems to respect his skills here. And they haven't been far off, you know. So like I said, it seems like he loses when he's supposed to lose, but he also wins when he's supposed to win, right? Against Marshall Tabora, he was sitting in a similar position, minus 125 or so, ends up finishing Tabora, who is a crafty veteran who, you know, I'll never forget, cashed that big underdog spot against Alexander Romanov, one of the biggest frauds in UFC heavyweight history. So give me Sakai here. You know, like I said, I mean, I think out of the two, he's the only one with some actual competent skills.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with you, right? I think just from my perspective, looking at that last fight, I mean, we've seen what Sergey Spivak can do, right? So like I'm not knocking Augusto Sakai for losing by knockout to Sergey Spivak, because we just saw him do the same to Derek Lewis in way less time, right? So my feeling more so resides on not the manner in which Sakai lost, but just like the look of dejection, just like pure like fourth knockout loss in a row, just kind of getting grounded pounded till he eventually gave up. If he can come back and pull this off, it's going to be 90% mental, I think, because as you mentioned, it's like he has the skill advantage here in the stand up. He should be able to stuff like a takedown or two, keep the fight standing a little bit longer, which favors him. But I don't know. At a minus price, I'm just having trouble getting to it. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to bet Dontel Mays here. As I've stated many times on this show, like heavyweight division is my least confident division of them all. So always have to tread lightly there unless I have ultimate conviction, which I don't have here. But just a gross fight, I think. Both guys, the matchup makes sense to me. Like, right, Sakai fought those tough guys. Give him Dontel Mays now, who's coming off, the grossest of gross losses. But I do have to combat what you said before, that you've never felt more disgusting after betting someone with Dontel Mays versus Hamdy. We got to talk about Will Knight a little bit last week.
No, we
that
don't.
was like the all-time. You don't get lower than that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that one. Actually, that was just like we got to publicly apologize to the Kings to every night that tabled that play, because very rare will you see a fighter just do nothing, right? Literally do nothing, and they, like we say nothing, and they actually fight. Like he actually did nothing, So
like you see that, and then you think of like what are the ultimate nothing fights of all time? You think Rose Carla too? Like he did less than them.
Yeah, Rose Carla, definitely. I mean, I forget who, but this is actually one of the first UFCs I ever followed. It was the first UFC in Montreal, and as I talk, maybe you can check out that card. But there was one fighter that was literally running away at the end of the fight, doing nothing all fight. I forget who it was. That the name escapes me, but that one's up there as well. Another one is I remember Talis Ladies against Anderson Silva was a fight in Montreal that I saw live. That was a 2-0 fight as well. Anderson Silva against Damian Maia in Abu Dhabi. If you remember that one, I mean that's another one where just sort of nothing happened. But Will Knight, and to do nothing against a guy in Marcin Pacino, who, again, I mean, you're talking about fading a bad fighter with a worse fighter. Like that is cut and dry what we mean. So live and learn. That'll never happen. I saw Will Knight got cut from the UFC, like rightfully so. Yeah, no, that guy needs to, you can't bench press your way into a victory. You know what I mean? Like the guy is Jack, and that's just goes to show muscles do not win fights, ladies and gentlemen. Muscles do not win fights.
Yeah, as much as the eye test would have told you William Knight would have won that fight, he actually has to fight for that to happen. So glad we could touch on that a little bit because it was deserving of a mention, especially since we unfortunately had a little bit of money on him last week, which definitely goes up there with worst bets of all time. 100% goes right up there with him. But let's move on to the co-main event here. It's actually an exciting fight. You and I both looking forward to it. Andre Muniz minus 235 going against Brendan Allen, available at plus 200 on the comeback. Another one of those fights here, man, where people are talking about the line and how if Brendan Allen approaches a certain area in this line, that it kind of turns into a must bet because of this, thing called value that a lot of people like to throw around every now and again without understanding what value means. If you think plus 200 is value here on Brendan Allen, where his only path to victory would be assumed to be striking, right? Brendan Allen's not a striker. Striking is the weakness of his game. So, to think that he could come into this and that's his only path and he's going to have to be the strongest there, you can't call that edge or value. That's just, willful thinking. You just really are being wishful there. But Andre Muniz, man, what can you say about him that hasn't already been said? The guy submitted Jacare Souza. I could just leave that at that. I mean, you could back me up on that, Dan. Jacare, in his mixed martial arts career, never had been submitted by anybody. And in grappling, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the only person that ever submitted him in grappling was Roger Gracie.
Roger Gracie is the GOAT. I mean, we say Gordon Ryan's a GOAT. You ask Gordon Ryan who the GOAT is, he's going to say Roger Gracie. You know what I mean? So, and he didn't just submit Jacare Souza. He fucking snapped his arm like a twig. You know?
Well, he submitted him twice because that didn't count, right? That was a decision win or a decision loss, actually.
Who? When he beat Jacare Muniz?
So didn't he snap Jacare's? Oh, you're talking about Muniz. I thought we were still on Roger Gracie.
No. Yeah. Sorry, I was talking about Muniz.
Because Gracie also, I believe, dislocated Souza's arm, but in a grappling bout, and he actually Souza wound up winning a decision there because he ran away with his arm tucked. But he actually ended up getting a rear naked the second time they grappled each other. I thought that's what you were talking about. But yeah, Muniz snapped Jacare's arm.
Yeah, and that was kind of the coming out party for him because I had known who Muniz was, but I think that was just a coming out party. I mean, listen, the guy has a couple of blemishes on his record. I mean, he lost in his for the UFC against our Murzakhanov, who he's the guy who just absolutely dismantled Devin Clark in his last fight, and a great prospect in his own right. So I think certainly no shame in that. The guy is 12-0 for a reason. But yeah, I mean, Muniz, I think I think a lot of folks are just going to assume that this guy is going to have the big submission grappling advantage over a lot of fighters. I mean, he wasn't able to submit Uriah Hall, but he did just absolutely dominate him from a position standpoint for 3 rounds. And listen, Uriah Hall, I mean, maybe you can back me up on this. I don't think he's ever been submitted, right? I mean, and we're talking about a guy with almost 30 professional fights. So, Uriah Hall from a defensive grappling standpoint is competent. And Muniz, I remember in that fight, has just big submission threat. I mean, there's a big difference between being a good grappler and then being the type of grappler that hunts the finish. And Muniz is both. When he lands a good position, he doesn't just kind of lay and pray. Like, he is hunting that submission at all times. And so I think Brendan Allen, it's a guy that I was very high on for the longest time. I remember him, submitting Kevin Holland and kind of, stopping his momentum. And then, you see the Kevin Holland that the Brendan Allen that just got dismantled by Sean Strickland. Gets finished by Chris Curtis, a fight where he had a clear path. And I mean, Chris Curtis has great takedown defense. We saw that in the Adolfo Vieira fight, but it was a fight that I was a bit of a head scratcher for me because he didn't even try to take down Curtis. And in his last few fights, he beat Sam Alvey where he was a massive favorite. He beats him in less than rear naked choke. But I mean, I think Sam Alvey, right? I mean, I know he's your guy. I know you love, but and then Jacob Malkoun, that was a fight that kind of went back and forth. Malkoun is one of these guys that is very much position over everything else. And Allen, he got taken down early, but was able to kind of squeak out a decision win. Submits Krzysztof Jotko. So the fact that people are saying that this guy's path is his striking, he's not a striker. The guy's a grappler. And I think there's levels to grappling. And Muniz is at the top in the UFC. There's trying to think of who else this guy from a submission standpoint, who's at this guy's level. I mean, Mackenzie Dern rings a bell.
Would you put him up with Islam?
Well, I think Islam, and we saw this in his last fight, he's not a finisher. He is a position dominant grappler, and that he'll take it when it's there, but he doesn't necessarily hunt for the finish. Whereas Muniz hunts for the finish, and I think that's what's going to happen here. I think he's going to land takedowns. I think he's going to submit Brendan Allen here. I really do. Allen is still super young. The guy's 27. Muniz is 33, right? So a little bit of an age gap there. I just think that we're talking about another level of grappling here, and Muniz on the feet is very competent as well. But again, he uses that to set up his grappling. Brendan Allen has been way too willing to go to his back in fights, and I think if you do that against a guy like Muniz, you're going to stay on your back for that entire round, or until you make a mistake and he catches your arm or catches your back. So. I think this line is absolutely justified. I love Muniz here. I'm definitely going to be betting him. I'm probably going to be betting him by submission. I'm probably going to be betting him inside the distance. I just think Brendan Allen was a guy that came out with a lot of hype. He had some good wins, some good like late round wins, right? And I think he kind of got derailed a little bit, got exposed by Strickland, got exposed by Chris Curtis. And again, another guy that seems to like beat who he should beat. But once you kind of take that step up in competition, I think that he's going to have some problems. And I think Muniz is, after a win here, I mean, he is going to be up there and prime for like a big fight. So I love Muniz here. I love his style. I love the fact that this guy hunts the finish, and I think he's going to get it today or on Saturday, I should say. So yeah, give me all the Andre Muniz this week. I am all over him.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely. And I think the only fight Brendan Allen's, I will call it showcased his striking or his leaned on it to win was against Punahele Soriano. And that was even in that round, it was, greasy. But Andre Muniz, I think you mentioned it, that he's constantly hunting the finish. But what's most impressive about that is he never seems to jeopardize his position to do so. Like, he'll hunt for a finish, but he's going to maintain his position if he doesn't get it. He's going to keep you, within an arm's reach. He's going to keep you in his body lock, or he's going to backpack, whatever it may be. He's just so savvy on the ground. And, you mentioned it, way better than most people. His grappling is top of the food chain in the UFC and all of mixed martial arts, I think. And to go against someone here, Brendan Allen, who it very well could be that he's a little bit overconfident in his own grappling prowess, that he's going to be able to hang on the mat with Muniz, and it could just be absolute worst case scenario for him if he thinks that way. I pray to God that he kind of comes in with that cocky attitude and attempts to hit the mats with Muniz, because they'll just make it that much easier for us. But when you're looking at Muniz, one thing that always like stands out is that he's so much bigger and longer than he appears. Like when you see him there, I think he's like 6'1". He's got a long ass reach as well, but like he's way longer than you would imagine him to be, especially standing up against his competition. And he does have 40% takedown accuracy. So if he doesn't get you down the first time, more times than not, he's getting you down that second time. And all he needs is really one time to get you down. Like you mentioned, Mackenzie Dern-esque. Like they possess danger at any given moment if they're able to find position on top of you. And, looking at Brendan Allen's history, I know we just touched on the Jakob Malkoun fight a little bit. He got taken down 7 times in that fight against Malkoun, who is a much smaller middleweight than most of the competition. He got taken down 3 times by Kyle Dawkins in a fight there that went back and forth, a lot of grappling exchanges that he lost in that fight. So, the opportunities are going to be there for Muniz to get these takedowns, to find himself in an advantageous position on the mat. And, I look at Muniz submitting Erick Anders, right? And he controlled Erick Anders, who is a brolic, big, strong dude.
Cool guy,
like Anders is a tank, and Muniz was able to just, control him, find himself in a position. I believe he locked in an armbar there and got the win. And someone like Allen, he's a bigger guy, but he's not stronger than Erick Anders. He's not, harder to get a grip on than Erick Anders. So if there's one question about Muniz, people bring up his chin, right? Well, we haven't really seen that been an issue so far in the UFC. The next thing they'll bring up is cardio. Well, we just saw him go 3 rounds against Uriah Hall last time out, not for a second looked phased or tired, and looked very composed in that 3rd round with back control. So I think all the questions I have about Muniz have been answered. And minus 225 here, I really like him there. Like him by finish, by submission. Actually, I don't see a knockout at all. I think you get submission around plus 130, plus 135-ish. And then another line I was looking at, double chance submission or points for Muniz brings it down to minus 150. So you don't have to pay, all that juice at minus 225. I think there's plenty of ways you could play Muniz here. I think fight doesn't go the distance might be around minus 250, but there's a chance Allen survives. So I'm more than okay playing Muniz at minus 225 and even up. I would, if I had to line this fight, I'd have him sure to like minus 350, minus 400 here. So minus 225 is a great price in my mind.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of looking here on Bet Online. Like sometimes they'll have lines of like who's going to land the most takedowns or over unders, things like that. It looks like they haven't released that for this fight yet. But I'm seeing Muniz minus 110 to win inside the distance. Muniz by submission at plus 135. So I don't know if I would get cute at that plus 135, but go Muniz to win inside the distance. And if it goes the distance, it's no action. That's sitting at minus 250. I mean, at that point, I would just bet Muniz minus 225. Like money line doesn't really make sense there. But yeah, it seems like we're on the same page. I mean, I can't stress this enough. You do not just submit Jacare Souza, and this guy snapped his fucking arm like a twig. Okay,
and he said he was going to too.
Yeah. I don't care if Brendan Allen is a black belt. I just don't care. There are levels to this game. Jacare Souza is a proven winner. And listen, grappling, I know Souza was at the tail end of his career, but the grappling aspect of the game, that tends to fade a little bit later on, right? I mean, you tend to get like those, your fast twitch muscles tend to fade as you get older, and that's why your reflexes aren't the same. That's why you see a lot of guys kind of move slower on the feet, but you can still grapple. You can still grapple and you can still attack and be an effective fighter going into your later years. I mean, Randy Couture was grappling guys well into his 40s. Mark Coleman, I remember, he was winning fights mid-40s because of his grappling.
Look at Glover Teixeira, right?
Glover Teixeira, exactly. So it's a situation where we know that Allen is susceptible to get taken down. We know Muniz is an absolute fucking killer. We know he can maintain top control, and we know that he hunts the finish. So is Brendan Allen gonna, kind of test his ego here and try to out-grapple? Or is he going to try and strike? He should try and strike. I think even if he tries to strike, I think he'll find himself ending up on his back. Like when he's just hyper aggressive, he has the gas tank to go the 3 rounds. So I just don't really see where Allen is going to present the danger here outside of a flash knockout or something of that nature. I mean, not ruling it out by any means, but yeah, I think Muniz here is on a nice little run and is going to get primed for a nice. Potentially like a co-main or main event shot at in his next fight. He's the real deal.
Yeah, for sure. He has all the danger in this matchup, I think, and glad we're on the same page there. I knew we would be, and it has nothing to do with you having any sort of grappling bias. It's just the facts, right? I mean, you said it best. You don't just submit Jacare Souza. He did it. He said he was going to do it beforehand. He snapped his fucking arm. It's not like it was rear naked or some lame like that.
Dirty snap, dirty break. Like that was one of the dirtiest arm breaks I think I've ever seen. It's right up there with like Tim Sylvia against Frank Mir. Like it was disgusting.
Absolutely gross. That's one of the reasons why my girlfriend won't watch UFC with me anymore, because that happened during that stretch of broken limbs and like 3 straight pay-per-views, and she happened to watch that one with me. So that submission sailed that ship for me to enjoy any time together watching UFC. But let's move on to the main event here, a fight that is dividing a ton of people, a fight that's dividing me and you, Dan, and that is Nikita Krylov taking on Ryan Superman Spann. Right now, Krylov minus 170, comeback on Ryan Spann plus 145. Spann obviously coming off highlight reel knockout against Dom Reyes in MSG, a fight that you and I were in attendance for. We were at the UFC Strike Lounge during it, though, so we did not get to see it up close and in person. We were too busy hanging out with pound for pound number 1, Alex Volkanovski, and all those other fighters. Obviously, thank you to UFC Strike for that event being in the Champions Club there. But yeah, this is a fun matchup because Spann is riding a nice little win streak. Krylov's riding a nice little win streak as well. I know we happened to cash in on Ryan Spann versus Iwan Kudalaba at a very nice price on the KP when they fought there. But, the way I look at this matchup, man, I just think that Krylov just is going to be a little bit too much for Spann to handle. I know Spann kind of had that soundbite his last time out saying, that was the first time he ever really trained for a fight. I don't put much stock into that at all. This guy's training, maybe he upped it a little bit, maybe he turned the notch up a little bit, but the guy he was training. Maybe he's just training a little harder now. Doesn't make you a better fighter. It might give you better cardio. You might be able to handle harder situations a little more easy than you would have before, but does not make you a good fighter. In my mind, this is still the same Ryan Spann that, I said it to you. He got the fucking shit kicked out of him by Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith made Ryan Spann his son, like really did from start to finish, had him in every bad position that he could possibly be in until he got him into a choke and got him to tap. And I could see Krylov doing the same exact thing here. Krylov is a guy who's a brawler. He brings the pace. He's going to try to take you down, get ground top control, ground and pound you, look for a submission. On the feet, I think he's well-rounded too. I think that he could strike well. He has a decent chin. And the craziest bit about all this to me is that he's only 30 years old. I think he's been in the UFC since like 2014, maybe, since he was 22 years old. And definitely caught me by surprise to see that he was younger than Ryan Spann here. Just looking at him, he kind of just looks like 36, 35 years old. So, his best days are ahead of him. He came off the win against Volkan Ozdemir last time out in a decision. Pretty gross fight, right? But I think he did exactly what he needed to get the job done. Before that, welcome back to Alexander Gustafsson to the octagon. Finished him in a flurry in that first round. Got him in, got him out. I just feel like he's going to get this fight to the mat. I don't see this one going longer than 2 rounds. Maybe it reaches the third, but I think Krylov finished him in the first, second, or third round.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think all respect to Krylov. I guess before I give my breakdown on this fight, I was wrong on both these guys in their last fight. I had Gustafsson beating Krylov. Don't ask me why. And I had Reyes beating Spann. Don't ask me why, but it happened. You live and learn. I think a guy like Spann, you just notice that he seems to be improving every fight. He seems to be really hitting his stride. I mean, I remember when this guy first came into the UFC, loses to Carl Robinson on the Contender Series, comes back, gets his shot in the UFC, goes on a nice little streak, was beating Johnny Walker, and then kind of just gets similar to what we saw with Paul Craig, like he just kind of hammer fist. I mean, Johnny Walker is super explosive. You give him an opportunity to land heavy shots, and he's going to put anybody out. And Anthony Smith, I mean, submitted him. And you're right, he did kind of take him to school. I think Smith, though, is a very good grappler, a lot more than a lot of people give credit to. And outside of those 2 blemishes, I mean, the guy has fought very well, continuously improving. And I get the feeling that he seems to learn from his mistakes. And that's why I think he's actually going to win here. I know he said that this is like his first training camp that he did in his last fight. I'm sure the guy has done training camps. I just think what he meant by that is that he's at a point in his career where he realizes that he belongs. Whereas, you look at some of his interviews in his earlier fights and, you almost kind of see I don't want to say maybe confidence issues, but maybe just kind of questioning his abilities. Do I really, can I really hang with the top of the top in this division? I think now at 31, he knows that he can. And I think he's kind of firing on all cylinders here. You have a guy in Krylov that, you're right, been around the block a long time. I remember when the UFC let him go initially after his first run here. I was kind of surprised because I thought he was very good. He loses to Misha Serkinov, and then he's out of the UFC for a couple of years. But what I just found interesting is how you look at how a fighter wins, but then you also got to look at how a fighter loses. And Krylov tends to put his head in places that they shouldn't be. What do I mean by that? Right. Well, this guy, lands top position against. He's bottom position, but holds on to a fucking guillotine from bottom half guard, and ends up getting Von Flued by Ovince St. Preux. Right. Okay, I know Ovince St. Preux, that's kind of his submission, right? He's got multiple people with it, but if you're a competent grappler, you should not get caught in that. That is kind of basics 101. When you're flat on your back, you don't hold on to a guillotine when you have no leverage. I mean, it just makes no sense. You're either giving up the Von Flue, You're giving up the arm triangle. So that's kind of a brain dead move from him. Gets submitted by Misha Serkinov. Gets submitted by Jan Blachowicz. Gets submitted by fucking Paul Craig when he is smashing him the entire round. Goes for a heavy ground and pound, gets caught in a triangle. So to me, I mean, it's pretty clear that the way to beat Krylov is to submit him. It seems like the longer this fight goes, it'll probably favor Krylov. But if you see how these guys fight, it's pretty clear that Krylov is a very, very aggressive guy, and that's part of the reason why I think he gets caught. He's a little bit too aggressive and maybe a little bit reckless, if you will. And I think Spann is going to be a little bit more measured in this fight. I think from a power perspective, at least in the hands, I think Spann actually might have the advantage here. Like, the guy is a physical freak. And I think he just doesn't get the respect that he deserves. I certainly didn't give him that respect against Dominic Reyes, but I think this is a very winnable match for him. I think I can actually see him submitting Krylov. I can see him knocking Krylov out. But what I really think is going to happen is, after like a few wild exchanges, I think we'll see Krylov kind of get in his own way, put his neck somewhere where it shouldn't be. And Ryan Spann has one of the nastiest guillotines. The guy has a lot of submission wins, and a lot of them are by guillotine, whether it be like up against the fence or from the bottom. I mean, I really think that he has the tools to win this one here, and yeah, I'm taking Spann here. I really think that this guy is at a point in his career where he's hitting on all cylinders. He's getting the right training in. He's fully committed. Not to say that Krylov isn't, but like I said, I think I've just seen less mistakes from Spann than I have from Krylov, and that's what kind of, when you're trying to like figure out who has the edge here, that's really the only thing that I can see. Very close fight to go the distance. I'm sure that's some retarded price that you just you don't want to touch. So give me the plus money here on Spann. I think we'll see a lot of favorites win on the main card here. I mean, we were just kind of run through it. It seemed like most favorites are in a favorable matchup here, but I think like this line should actually be closer to a pick'em. So just judging by kind of the line movement and what you see on best fight odds, it seems like there's money coming in on Spann, and I think, well, I guess it depends, right? I'm looking here. It seems like he opened like plus 130. I'm seeing, but it's been kind of like a gradual increase, right? So not much movement. He got dropped down to like plus 120 at one point, but be interesting to see what he's at on come fight night. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you see Krylov come out on top. A super competitive fight, super close fight, but I like Spann here. He really impressed me in his last matchup, and I think he's just continuously improving here. So I'm going to go on the limb. I'm going to say Spann submits him with a guillotine after Krylov just kind of sticks his head somewhere where it shouldn't be. And, from there on, we're going to see more people talk, kind of naysayers become Ryan Spann fans. So give me, and then you got the Superman versus the Kryptonite, right? I mean, you got that whole narrative, right? So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I like Spann, and at the plus money, I think it's an attractive price.
Yeah, and guillotine is certainly an opportunistic submission, right? And we kind of saw that in the Iwan Kudalaba fight, right? Kudalaba kind of slipped and found himself in a guillotine and tapped his way out of it. So Spann definitely has done a good job capitalizing on his opponent's mistakes there like that. In terms of the line, I think what we're seeing here is the big money coming on Krylov, right? I think a lot of the ticket percentages are coming in on Spann, but the amount of money itself is coming in on Nikita Krylov, which is why we're seeing the movement act the way it is. And I feel like everyone that's jumping to Spann now, at this dog money, is doing so a little bit too late, because you could have had him at like plus 195, I think, around that area against Iwan Kudalaba. And then the last time out against Dominic Reyes, I think, was around plus 150, if I'm not mistaken. And, they see those two big finishes, wins in a row, and now they come back. This is casual viewers for the most part, and they see, wow, I could get this guy Spann at plus money, who's coming off that huge knockout of Dominic Reyes, right? And he just said he's training for the first time ever. Dom Reyes was the last person to fight John Jones, who fights next week. So a lot of this feels a little bit intertwined and baked into the market price and the psychology of how bettors think when they go to, the betting counter to place their bets. So I'm not worried about the price too much when it comes to Nikita Krylov. I feel like it's placed at a price right now where it is going to generate action on both sides. And I think the sharp groups are going to act on the Krylov side. It's going to be such an entertaining fight, which is another reason why I lean Krylov. I think the way to beat Ryan Spann is to make him uncomfortable, to kind of put him in these uncomfortable situations. If you're going to stand and trade with him, at a striker's distance, I think that really favors Ryan Spann. We kind of saw it in the Anthony Smith fight, right, where he kind of just went full throttle towards Ryan Spann, made him fight off his back foot, really made him fight off his back, defend takedowns, eat a few shots coming in. And Spann crumbled. He absolutely crumbled. It's not even like he just happened to get caught in a submission. He got beat. He got broken that fight by Anthony Smith. And then, Iwan Cutelaba, you would think that that's one of those fights that would kind of favor Cutelaba there, which it did early on. I mean, early on, Spann was getting beat until I mentioned that, Cutelaba slipped, Spann caught him. Johnny Walker, that's a hectic fighter to go against. What happened? He got knocked out, attempting a takedown of his own Ryan Spann. So I think Krylov kind of possesses the kind of fight style that lends itself to beating Ryan Spann. I feel like I keep saying I feel like, but I know Krylov here is in my mind at minus 170 a really good play. And I think that if you could get a decent number on an inside the distance, I don't really know what that price is. That would probably be another good way to play it. But, I wouldn't rule out a decision win for Krylov. I know it sounds absolutely crazy, but you just can't rule it out when you see all these takes and stuff where it's like, no way this one goes the distance. I think if Dana White does one of his, if you don't know, now you knows, right? And he comes and talks about this fight and he ends it with, there's no way this one goes to the judges, then I might have to play a decision prop there.
Yeah, I think it's a nice contrarian play that's like absolutely live. I mean, we've seen it before in kind of Krylov fights where, you think this guy is just a finishing machine, and then he goes, 3 straight decisions, to Shera, Johnny Walker, Ankalaev. So, yeah, I think you can make the case for both guys here, which is why I'm approaching this as kind of a dog or pass situation. But yeah, Krylov, I think, like I said, he tends to be kind of his own worst enemy sometimes. Like he can do really well and then just kind of put himself in a shit position and get finished. So yeah, I mean, fully agree with your points. I think they're all valid. I wouldn't be surprised if Krylov comes away with the victory here, but I'm just of the opinion that I think Spann is at a point in his career where he's turning a corner, and the next 3-4 fights we're going to really see kind of a new Spann kind of come out and showcase his skills. The guy's still getting better. And I mean, listen, if this last fight was his first real camp, I mean, I'm interested to see what he's going to show up and what he's going to show up in. I mean, the guy is a physical freak. I think he'll have the power advantage, and I think from a mental standpoint, he seems to be, like I said, a guy that's learned from his mistakes. So, I like that we're on both sides here, so that we can kind of present both cases.
Yeah, I mean, definitely makes you question where you're standing, if it's valid or not, right? If you're kind of grasping at straws, which is always good. Getting into an echo chamber with this space could always turn out really poorly. Again, as evidenced by William Knight last week. But definitely a good fight. I think that this card really stacks up well when you're comparing it to the last 2 cards we've been faced with and dealt. So definitely looking forward to the main event here. Going to be a blast, going to be a banger. Before we sign off, fun fact, Ryan Spann got knocked out by Carl Roberson on the Dana White Contender Series.
Yes, he did.
just throwing that one out there. But, it was a blast breaking this card down with you, Dan. I missed you last week. Missed Kev this week. We're at an hour 15 right now without him. I can only imagine how long this episode would have went if he was here. But let's just be happy that we got this one over with, and hopefully we cash in for the KP again. If I'm not wrong, the KP has had positive slates in a row. So the last one was marginal, but it was still plus.
That's right. Profit is profit, and we just got to keep the good times rolling. And there's a lot more fights to go for the rest of 2023. So as long as we can kind of stay out of our own way and stay in the green, I mean, we can't really complain. But if you were tailing me,
Yeah.
Let's just say you would have been way up.
Let's say it how it is. Dan went like what +7 units on the card last week on MMA tips.
1.7 units. I mean, a lot of that was because of Blanchfield. I had Blanchfield inside the distance at +300. We cashed that. Blanchfield +110. I mean, I was away, so unfortunately, when you're in the US, I didn't have access to some of the books that I use. So otherwise, I would have hammered Blanchfield early on in the week. I mean, I was seeing like +165. I was kind of licking my chops. So by the time I got back into Canada, she was down to like +110, which. Again, I mean, I was looking at similar to like what we saw with Strickland and Imavov, late replacement, kind of line opening, a little bit wonky, not sure what to take, and yeah, I mean, everyone was just preaching Andrade. But just goes to show that sometimes, when you have a take, you just got to kind of trust yourself and not let outside influences sway you. So, but again, I got it this week. I'm sure there'll be opportunities where you guys get me back. The space is like a rubber band, right? It snaps back one way and comes even harder the way back. So it is what it is. But yeah, listen, I got my bragging rights last week. Excited, but gonna hopefully do it all over again after Spann wins.
We'll see for sure, guys. Thank you for joining us. Next week, make sure you tune in because it is the return of the GOAT, Johnny Bones Jones, making his return to the octagon, his heavyweight debut against Cyril Gane, UFC 285. That card is stacked from top to bottom. Bo Nickel making his UFC debut as well. So make sure you tune into Fight Night next week. Get the breakdowns with us. And I believe we have a special guest joining us next week as well. In Liam Picks Fights. So he's been a guest on the show before. Excellent knowledge. He knows how to break down a fight. Make sure to join us here at Fight Night. Follow us on Twitter. Join us in the Knights of Degen Discord and sign up for SoBet with our link in the description. We are 2-0, posting positive slates on SoBet with some extra picks saved specifically for SoBet and not posted in the Discord. Make sure you sign up using our link there and hit the subscribe button if you aren't already, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.